British pantomime, is a popular form of theatrical entertainment staged mostly at Christmas and aimed at family audiences, but laced with double entendres, double meanings. Its humour is broad and silly, slapstick, audience participation. He's behind you. Exaggerated costumes, mock characters, stock characters. It's meta-theatrical. It's aware of itself. It's aware of the jokes. It's aware of the theatre. It's aware of breaking the fourth wall. It's saucy but safe. The classic nudge, nudge, carry on humour. Plenty of innuendo, but nothing too explicit. It's topical, sly references to politics, to celebrities, to local news, and it's gender-bending traditions. The men in drag, the dame, the principal boys, which is almost evaporated in modern productions, women playing the young male heroes. The classic panto performers like Barry Humphries as Dame Edna Everage, the Australian, a master of the style of the dame. Danny LaRue, the legendary drag star who elevated that role. Christopher Biggins, a stalwart of modern dame tradition. John Inman. I remember seeing John Inman in the Palladium before the Palladium abandoned its pantomime tradition, and it was only recently revived. Babes in the Wood, I think, was a production I remember. Julian Clary, gleefully outrageous, expert at walking the line between family-friendly and utterly scandalous. The pantomime Dick Whittington is based very loosely on the legend of Richard Whittington from 1354 to 1423, who became Lord Mayor of London. And the story, a poor boy, Dick, hears that the streets of London are paved with gold. He travels to London with his cat and he's mistreated, but eventually triumphs, often with magical help, and he becomes Lord Mayor, fulfilling his destiny. The legend was already popular by the 17th century. By the 19th century, it became standard panto fare. And because Dick is an obvious source of innuendo in English, panto is meant to let the adults laugh knowingly while children see only the innocent service. And British audiences love this ambiguity. It's practically a social contract. You know, lines like, I've been all over town and not a sign of Dick. And you've lost Dick? How careless. We need Dick back. The whole town's waiting. I thought Dick was bigger than that. And the one line that I particularly enjoyed when I was playing the alderman in Epsom was, if you look after the contents of this safe, you'll be a dick among men. And the trick with these things is to deliver them deadpan, sometimes with a raised eyebrow or a conspiratorial glance at the audience, carefully short of being obscene. The joke is in the implication, not in the outrage. And so I come back to a fellow who keeps popping up, so to speak. Appropriately, his name is Dick, or at least he says his name is Dick. I'm not entirely sure whether he's a real Dick or whether he's some sort of contrived Dick, but he's called TONYDICK, and he's put out various stories. In fact, he never seems to. It's almost impossible to keep this Dick down. But today he's talking about Alex Belfield. And Alex Belfield, and I thought I should talk about Alex Belfield myself because I know a certain amount about the story. And indeed, I had a run-in with Alex. Alex Belfield is a former BBC local radio presenter who built a significant independent following online, particularly on YouTube, and he traded on a style that was direct, sardonic, and deliberately provocative, and much of his material drew inspiration from British entertainment, and particularly the panto and the sort of sly music hall-infected humour that was later polished by figures like Ken Dodd, whose timing, wordplay, and gently subversive edge were things that Belfield clearly admired. He and I were drawing, or have drawn, on very much the same material. when I'm thinking about Matt Hancock in a stationery cupboard. Oh, let's have an HB pencil with a rubber on it. I'm thinking also of Frankie Howerd and the brilliance of that tradition. In 2022, Belfield was convicted at Nottingham Crown Court of stalking 4 people, including BBC Two presenter Jeremy Vine, and the trial focused on what prosecutors described as a campaign of sustained online harassment. And it didn't involve following victims in person or direct threats of physical violence, but instead relied on thousands of social media posts, emails, and videos that were found to be abusive, obsessive, and damaging and invasive. And he contacted people's homes. He telephoned somebody's mother. He was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison, a term that sparked considerable controversy. And critics argued that the sentence was disproportionate, as indeed does TONYDICK, particularly given that some violent and sexual offenders receive less. And supporters of the verdict maintained it was justified because the court found the harm caused to the victims was significant, with one describing it as the Jimmy Savile of trolling, a phrase that, while rhetorical, underscores the scale of the perceived abuse. And Belfield was released from prison on license after serving part of his sentence a few weeks ago. In line with standard procedures, he has since resumed broadcasting online with a daily show. Now, initially, there was curiosity about his return. A few post-release videos attracted large numbers, fueled by supporters eager to hear his side of the story and critics checking on his tone. And he used this platform to maintain his innocence, to attack what he characterizes as a flawed, politicized prosecution. But the Daily Show now attracts a minuscule audience, and the astonishing numbers that he once commanded on YouTube have gone. His loyal core remains. Ooh, it's a loyal core. Much of the general public has drifted away, and the novelty of his comeback has faded, and the relentless force of his own legal battle has arguably limited his wider appeal. That he's allowed to continue in public communication is not surprising in purely legal terms, I think is morally questionable. There's no broad ban on people with his convictions working in media, and he remains entitled to argue. However, there is a sort of ring fence of restrictions around him, what he can say, what he can see, what he can listen to. But however controversial it may seem, when he continues to argue that his conviction was wrong, but it's fair to say that many remain uneasy about the situation, about the fact that he is broadcasting at all. And I'm surprised that he's permitted to continue in this sort of public work and to attack the legitimacy of his conviction so freely. But despite that, and this is where I find myself differing from some of his detractors, I would never question his skill as a performer. And he is a master of this sort of saucy, salacious humor, and I'm sorry that he didn't put it to greater good, because he is he is broadly brilliant. He's undeniably talented at pacing, at punchlines, at maintaining audience engagement, and much of his humour and style draws explicitly from those traditions which had long since gone from the 1940s and 1950s British comedy, with roots in music hall routines, the carefully rehearsed audience-aware clowning of Ken Dodd, which was then perfected for television. Indeed, those traditions prized timing, character work, and the knowing kind of wink. I'm very cautious of the vowel at the audience, and Belfield's monologues often show real mastery of that approach, with layered callbacks and a studied informality that belies the very considerable preparation. But there's an important distinction to be made. The old music hall comedians, even the sharpest, generally punched upwards or sideways with social observation and absurdity, and critics argue that Belfield's output often crossed from cutting satire into sustained personal targeting of very specific individuals, which was the crux of the criminal case. I know some of those individuals, and I think Belfield's behaviour was abhorrent. But at the same time, I don't mind whether Tarquin is real or whether Tarquin is an invention. It's a brilliant name. It's a brilliant invention. It belongs with Everard and Poppitin Pete. Poppitin Pete is the postman, the Larry Grayson postman, and this host of offstage characters that Belfield has invented. I don't think James, the assistant, is one of them, but we did see him the other day rearranging the microphone. Oh, he's rearranging my microphone. Ooh. And the catchphrases. All of this comes from the 1940s and 1950s, the beginning of television and the move from radio into television, and of course to what's the one about being served? Are you being served? Yes, there we are. But I think it's important to look at what TONYDICK has to say. Some of us were outraged. Oh, outraged! Outraged. Oh, it's bitter in, isn't it? Bitter. Some of us were outraged, he says, that Alex Belfield could be jailed for 5.5 years when there was no evidence involved. I'm not sure there was no evidence involved, TONYDICK. He didn't even follow people down the street. All he did was talk and make social media posts. Actually, he also telephoned. I seem to recall that others at the time thought it was entirely justified, even though many pointed out that violent and sexual offenders often received lesser sentences. I think that might have been me, Tony. Ooh, well, there we are. This reflects the division in public opinion neatly. Many saw the case as a worrying example of criminalising speech alone, hurty words, while others insisted that words, when used to torment and harass over years, can inflict deep and lasting harm, deserving of real sanction. If you want to use words in a provocative way, in a satirical way, you choose people in power. People in power who you believe have done wrong or have got above themselves. Alex Bell, you don't choose people and punch down. And you certainly don't attack people's families. And that's the point, really. Alex Belfield's case sits uncomfortably at the intersection, I agree, of free speech, online harassment and criminal law. He's out of prison. He's making a noise again, a testament to both the resilience of his personal style and the freedom of speech, protections that allow even convicted offenders to resume public communication. Yet it is also a cautionary tale about the limits of humour when directed persistently at private individuals in a way found by a jury to be abusive and harmful. And whether one sees him, Alex Belfield, as a wronged provocateur or a justified cautionary example, there is no doubt he remains a compelling, if divisive, performer. And that very division, that very divisiveness, one suspects, was always part of his act, but was mistargeted, was poorly managed. I don't know whether Belfield himself would say, "Oh, I got bad advice," or "Oh, I'm just a wrong 'un." I don't know. I think he would maintain that he's been crucified unreasonably, stabbed, pierced. I nailed. He's been nailed. But I've spoken to people that he has hurt, and even after all these years, the pain remains, and he's done nothing. He's done nothing to sort out the harm he's caused. If anything, he's simply rallied and become more and tried to continue to threaten and to provoke. The law is supposed to encourage people to learn their lesson. I would hope that's something that Alex Belfield has done, and I don't think it's helped greatly by the tone of TONYDICK, but I don't think TONYDICK can really help it. Also, I don't quite understand why there's one or two people who are constantly leaving comments on my on this YouTube channel. I'm delighted that they watch. It's and I'm delighted that they leave these comments because they are interesting and thought-provoking in their own way. But I equally wonder how on earth they find the time to do it. And for myself, I put my hand on my heart and I say, I simply make these videos in between other things that I'm doing. I tend not even to watch them, and I'm delighted that anybody would watch them. And if you find I've said something that is inconsistent or inappropriate, please call it out. Let me know, because it's wash and go, or speak and go. It's not. I don't spend my time listening to what I put out, I'm afraid. I've got lessons to teach. I've got things to do. And I get up very early in the morning, and I look at a range of newspapers: the FT, the Telegraph, the Times, the Guardian. I also look at the Daily Mail, because I'm always entertained by Boris Johnson's column. There's a bit more Frankie Howard and Nadine Dorries. Nadine Dorries, I must say, mock not, but Nadine Dorries is quite brilliant. I would love to ghostwrite for Nadine Dorries, but her writing style is spectacular. And if anybody's not read The Plot, they should go out and buy a copy. It's one of the best reads. It's such an easy read, and it's pure nonsense, but it's very compelling. And while as a politician I thought that she was she bordered on the ridiculous, as a writer, I got through cancer reading her books, by the way. And I remember I was lying in bed, having had quite serious surgery, just reading what is all these people at the four corners, the crossroads, and she's a page turner, and then for good measure, I would generally pop over and have a look and see what GB News has done. At the end of this, maybe if I've got some time left, I will have a look at the BBC. I will then also look at some foreign newspapers. I'm particularly keen on the Greek press, Kathimerini, because I used to write for them at one point, and it's also quite interesting to look at particularly British news from another perspective. I don't always agree with what is written in these newspapers, and I'm sure there's something else I look at routinely. I can't what it is, but yeah, and that's it. And then after I've done my videos, I go off and teach, or I write, or I continue with my film work. I'm making a little animated film. In fact, I'm making 3 little animated films. That takes time. and it's hand-drawn stuff. Alex Belfield would probably say it's a hand job, but there we are. Or Tony Dick. Tony Dick, a hand job for Tony Dick. There we are.